So what we're going to talk about is animating and getting your character ready for basically the animations that we're going to do in Unity. And how we do that is we actually animate the character in Blender, and then we kind of we call those animations in Unity through code. Is basically how we're going to do it. So what we need to do is get the character set up and do a series of specific animations. So what we're going to basically do is just a couple. The one we're going to have, you always start out in the T-pose. Okay, Unity seems to really like that. So one of the things that you're going to do is you're going to set up you got your character, you've been kind of playing around with it, making sure it's all good. So you're just going to hit select all. You're going to go back down to your pose. You're going to hit clear transform all. And that's just going to take any transformation that you did on any of the bones in pose mode. It clears it, and it takes you back to the T-pose. Then what you want to do is you want to insert a keyframe for this pose, whole character down at the bottom, boom. And that's going to insert this as a pose for your character. And you can take a look. I've already got a few keyframes down there. We'll get to those in a second. But if I go to the animation here, you can see right here on frame number 1, we have our T-pose, okay, and it's locked in as a keyframe, and you can see all the bones and everything like that. Now, one of the other things that we're going to do is we prep this, and I'll actually do a very short little animation on this, or demo on this later, is we're going to want to rename all of our bones. And I'll talk about how you do this and what the best protocol is for it, because when we get into Unity, you really need to be able to tell what bone is what, and it doesn't quite respond like Blender. So here I could click on it and I would see the bone. It doesn't work that way in Unity. So we're going to want to rename them all. We'll talk about that later, but you can see bone 34, like, well, what is that? Who cares, right? Okay, so now what we're going to do, and let's go back to the default because it's a little easier to work in that sometimes. So now one of the things that we can do here is we're going to then get ourselves a resting pose. Now he's already starting to move, and that's because I've got these keyframes that are here that are later on. And that's completely okay. But right around 30, a little bit of a gap, actually probably not around 30, you probably want to, well yeah, and it's good to have a little bit of a gap. We're going to go to a resting pose. So I'm just going to take the bones and I'm just going to hit the G key and grab them. Now one of the things that's really important to kind of realize when you're animating your characters is that when you hit the G key works in a perpendicular manner to the axis of the camera. So if you draw an imaginary dotted line from the camera to the object that you're manipulating, okay, so from the lens of the camera, if you will, straight to the bone of this hand, if I hit the G key and I grab it and move, it's going to move basically perpendicular to that imaginary line. So it's basically going to move in the X and Y axes as if this was a flat thing. That's really important because hitting the G key and moving things oftentimes gets people in a lot of trouble because you only see it moving this way and it might move in a very different direction than you're expecting. But once you get used to that, it actually can really help. The other thing that I will do is I will not hesitate to go and grab a bone and use the rotate tool. So most of the time when I'm in Blender and I'm animating, I stay on the rotate tool down here and then I will rotate, and then if I want to grab an object and move it as if I had the translate tool, I will just use the G key. So I'll hit 3 and then I can kind of hit G and get that set up like that. And you can see that that's looking okay except for the fact that his thumb is now inside his thigh. So do that. I can rotate that a little bit like this. Okay, make that a little bit better. Whoops, not that much. I can also take the thumb and I can rotate it down a little bit more and in a little bit more, okay, to kind of like get his hand together. The other thing that's really important is no one ever walks or rests with stiff fingers, okay? So you want to really be mindful of that. You want the fingers to be curved a little bit. So I can hit G and grab just a little bit of a curve on those fingers like that, okay? Maybe a slight bit more of a bend to the fingertips, okay? And then you always check everything from multiple directions so that you're making sure that, because I've done it many times where you bend something this way and then you swing around and it's like that, okay? So you want to be really careful, especially if you're using G to grab the fingers or whatever, and you're relying on the inverse kinematics to put them where you want them. That does work, but sometimes it works in a way that you didn't expect. So every time you move something, I'll move a couple fingers and then I'll swing around and just make sure everything is really good. Do the same thing here. So you hit 1 on the numpad, and then I'm just going to go and hit G to grab. Okay, bring that down. Hit 3. Go in from the side, bring that. And it's good not to be symmetrical, right? I mean, you want things to look a little bit more natural. And now I can kind of rotate these things and go. The other thing that you can do is you can keep the rotation local. So instead of a global rotation where your axes are based upon the global axis, if you go to local, you'll see how all of a sudden things change. So the axes are going in line with the direction of the bone. So now my x-axis is in line with the bone's axis this way. Sometimes that can also be really, really helpful, especially when it comes to things like fingers and stuff. I can kind of just bring things in and rotate them down a little bit and do so with the local axes. It can help. I mean, you know, you got to be careful with it, but it can work. Now I'm just hitting the G key and just bending them a little bit. Then I'll get these and rotate maybe just a tiny bit there, and you get the idea. So now let's say I've got a resting pose. It's still not quite perfect because the thumb is still kind of coming through the hip there a little bit. So maybe we'll bring this out just a tiny bit like that. There we go. Maybe bring the upper arm down a little bit and then bring the forearm back out. So once we kind of get a good resting pose, I just did a lot of movement there before I checked the 3D, by the way. So, you know, just be mindful of that. So once I've got a good resting pose, I'm going to hit A until I've got all of the bones selected. Then I'm going to hit the I key, and I'm going to insert another animated or another keyframe for the entire character. And then this is going to give me my resting pose. Now, you've probably noticed a big thing in video games these days is if the character is resting, that they kind of sway a little bit or whatever. And you can do that if you want. Whenever we set up loops like that in Unity, the really important thing, as I'm about to show you with our walk cycle, is that the last keyframe is the same as the first keyframe, so that the loop works and there's no like big jump from one position to the next. And most of you will get that pretty instinctively. But I'm just going to say this is my resting pose right here. We're not going to bother with that. Now we're going to start with our walk cycle. And I've already started a walk cycle. And yes, there will be transitions in the middle. And somebody was asking me in my other class, they said, well, what about this long transition? Like, was that going to matter? And the answer is no. When we're in Unity, what Unity is going to do, when we tell it to start walking, it's going to start at the first keyframe for the walk cycle. And then it will continue looping our walk cycle until we tell it to do something else. And the really cool thing is, because Unity can see the skeleton or the armature, that it will actually do blending. So let's say you're in a walk cycle and then all of a sudden you want to run. It will actually blend from the walk cycle to the run cycle and do the tweening or the in-between animations on its own. So we don't actually have to animate those changes, say, from a rest to a walk. Unity will do that for us, which is really cool. So we don't have to worry about that. So here's how we start a good walk cycle. And I'm lazy. I always like to use, you can try to do a walk cycle by yourself, but guess what? It doesn't, you can try, but somebody's already done a lot of the work for you. So I'll just go online and I'll look up, see, it's already there. I'll look up walk cycle reference, okay? And then click on images, and you'll get a whole bunch of images that are really good references for a walk cycle. And this one here is my favorite so far. And the reason being is it's very clear, it's very concise, and it gives me really good information between what's the back leg and the front leg. They shaded the back leg in a little bit. It's not only relying on lines to tell me which is my back and front leg, and so that actually really helps. A lot of the other references I've seen will stop after half of the cycle because they're going to assume that you know how to do the rest of the cycle and just flip-flop the sides. And I mean, it's really not hard, but it is kind of hard to keep track of. This is one of them. This is great. This is from a book called The Animator's Survival Kit, and I love it. And I have it here in the room if you want to take a look at it. I really recommend it. But the annoying part about this is you'll see how it does end the cycle, but it only ends the cycle halfway through. You have to then go back through and redo the cycle, but just flip the legs. So it's kind of frustrating. So I really do find this one's good. I've already saved it to my desktop. So now I'm going to bring it into Blender so that I can use it as a reference. So click the plus symbol that's in your 3D view right here. And then when you scroll down, you'll see background images. You're going to check that on, and then you're going to add an image. And then you open it, and I put it on the desktop. So there's my desktop. One walk cycle, there it is, and I'm going to open the image. And now you might say, okay, it's great, WisePro, where is it? Well, it only shows up when you are flat on, so I have to hit either 1 or 3, and then it will show up. So I'm going to hit 3 on the numpad, and then I've got that. Anytime I move or rotate, it'll disappear. So that's important to kind of realize. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale it up here, and then I'm going to move it side to side and up. Now, obviously, the first one actually is this one here. And it's going the wrong direction. Well, luckily enough, Blender anticipated that, and you've got a checkbox here for flipping the horizontal axis. And now we're going to take the X and bring it over here, and there's our first keyframe. I'm going to scale it up even more. Okay, you want it to be scaled up so that the size of the character is close enough to the size of your actual character, or the size of the drawing is close enough to the size of your actual character that it's not too hard to translate. So that's pretty good right there. Okay? Then what you do is you pose your character in that position, making sure that you check it from 3D every once in a while, and then you're going to go select all, hit the I key, whole character. Then what I'll do is I'll bring it back, I'll cover the one that I just did, and then I move forward 5 frames. And then I do the same thing. I pose the character, select all, I, whole character. And I'm going to keep doing that. Okay? And you can kind of see it. It won't be exactly the same, but it'll be pretty darn close. Now, I need to delete the keyframe here that I just did because it's way off. Well, I forget how to do it here, so I'm just going to go to animation. So I'm on this keyframe here. And I can select it and X to delete it. Okay. Let's go back to default because it still is a lot easier. So here you can kind of see I'm on this keyframe right here. Okay. And then we can continue. So just watch how I do this real quickly. I'll just do a couple of them here. So I'm going to move forward. And now I've got my left leg is kind of down, so I'll just click this, and I'm going to hit G to grab it. And now sometimes I'll put it in place, and then I'll rotate it. Okay, so it's kind of like that. And then this one is back a little further than it was here, like this. And then again, sometimes I use grab, and sometimes I use rotate. And then this one here, this hand here, honestly, probably just easier for me. Let's go to global. And then I'll just rotate that, get the palm back here. Now, my walker has his arms in a fist. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to keep them, I'm going to keep them kind of, you know, relaxed hands. Not going to worry about that. So now I've got that. That's my next keyframe. I'm going to hit I, or select all like this, hit I, and insert the whole character. Now I'm going to move forward 5 more frames, and then I'm going to slide this over and do the next one. Now that actually is really important, to actually move forward 5 frames, because here's the problem. If I don't move forward 5 frames, let's say I stay on 80, okay, and now I start to move my character, so G to grab, okay, and then I'll rotate this a little bit, rotate that one a little bit, okay. And then let's just say I'm about ready to set up my keyframe. Guess what? I'm in trouble right now. Because if I hit select all and I insert my keyframe, I've now overwritten over top of the previous one, which is on frame 80. However, also if I move forward, I'm going to lose it. I'm going to lose what I've just posed. Okay? Well, that's better than losing the keyframe that I did before. But it's really important. So before you hit insert keyframe, one of the things that I've always tried to do is I always try to look down and make sure if I'm already on a keyframe. And if I am already on a keyframe, then I ask myself, wait a second, am I redoing a keyframe or am I supposed to be doing a new one? And if I'm supposed to be doing a new one, stop. Don't hit I, because you're going to wreck what you've previously done. So then I go click on 85, and guess what? I lost all my work on posing, but I didn't lose my previous keyframe, which is far worse. So, you know, you always want to be kind of careful on that. So I'm going to do this, and then I'll take this, and then I'll bring this way, bring the toe like that. So that's more natural. There we go. The arm is kind of swinging back down a little bit. And then this is probably back a little bit like this. There we go. And one of the things is now I've actually gone through the floor a little bit with this foot. So I'm going to hit select all. And before I do anything else, I'm going to move him up just a little bit so that he's actually touching the floor, not going through it. Okay, so there's a little bit of up and down. You can see that he's going down. He's down here, and then he's going to head back up a little bit. So did that, and then I'm going to hit I and insert my next keyframe. Let's go back to 90. Now we've covered that one up. And it's really important, I find it's really important to make sure that when you're doing this, you move this, because that's how I stay, like, I keep track of where I'm at and what I've already done. Because if I don't do that, then I'm in a lot of trouble. Okay, so now just let's see if I can pose these, whoops, really fast. Don't do that. Deselect, grab, put his leg straight, basically, like that. And then I'll go back to rotate. We'll bring his foot like this. So you can kind of see now he's going through the floor again, so I'm going to have to really take care of that. Bring his leg forward, bring this leg like that. Bring the foot, rotate it a little bit more. I mean, you know, if there's subtle differences, that's okay, you know, between what you're doing and what what the keyframe is. You know, you can change things. You can make the head bob, whatever you want. So now select all. I'm going to move him up so that he's actually resting on the floor. And then I hit I, insert keyframe. I'm going to go to 95. We'll cover that. So I'm almost done here. So now I click on this one. Let's go back to rotate. Okay, I'm going to go like this. Kind of bring that together. And then I'll hit this, go G, bring it back a little bit like this. Then I'll rotate the bottom of the foot a little bit. Maybe bring it down with the G key like that, so that we're going to go up a little bit more. And now this front arm. Now sometimes when the arms are like this, I got to make sure I'm clicked on the right one, because see, I wasn't there. So then I'll hit 3 again, and I'll just rotate that so that it's that way, and then that way. And then this one I'll rotate back a little bit more like that. And that looks pretty good. Select all. Go to move mode. Bring them up just a slight bit like that. And then hit I and insert. Now, what should happen now is that this next frame that I have to do is exactly the same as the first frame was, right? So in order to do that correctly, the best thing to do, instead of trying to make it perfect, which it's not, you would never be able to do it exactly the same, right, is to actually duplicate the first keyframe that we did. So I can go here, go to Animation, and I'm going to take this first keyframe that I did, and I'm going to hit Shift and D. So I'm going to right-click on that, Shift D, and bring it over, and now I've got a keyframe that is identical to what I have, and I can watch it go. And if I really want to make sure that it's working properly, what I can do is start with this one here. I'll highlight all of these and hit Shift D again, and I'll just set up a cycle. and then I'll just play it for a little bit. That looks pretty good. Okay, and then once I do that, what I should have done is I should have memorized which one was the end of the cycle, but I'll just undo, undo, undo. So now I've got those, but we're not quite done yet, because here's the one problem with what we've done, and this is really key. Ready? And this is a little secret that a lot of people don't know or you won't hear on YouTube stuff. If you have the first frame of your cycle and the last frame of your cycle actually the same, okay, what's going to happen is there's a 2-frame glitch that'll happen. It's not really a glitch, it's a pause. For 2 frames, he's going to be the same. And so he'll actually stop moving when it cycles back to the beginning. It didn't happen in what we did there because I didn't duplicate the first frame again. Okay? But if I had and put it right next to the original, you would have seen this little pause. So how we get around that is actually really easy, but you just kind of have to think about it. So what we really need is this last frame here needs to be the frame before it. So all I have to do is click 1 frame in. So I'm at my last frame of the cycle is 100. So I'm actually going to go to 99. And if you need to help, you can actually click these little arrows down here at the bottom where the frame rate is on the timeline. Get you right on 99. Okay? Make sure the bones are all selected, and you're going to insert a new keyframe. Whole character. Done. Now you've got a keyframe for the motion 1 frame before. And then I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to delete the keyframe afterwards. And so what happens now is when we call the animation in Unity and it starts looping, we're going to call it from frame 60 to frame 99. Not to frame 100, but to frame 99. And then that way, that last frame, it'll then put 60 basically right after number 99 again, and we'll have smooth motion. So that's actually really important to remember to do. If you don't, it's not huge. We can always make adjustments later. And that's actually one of the really cool things about animating poses like this with Blender and the armature system is you can really mess up this animation. And all you have to do is delete keyframes and reset your poses, and you never wreck your character. So that's really kind of nice. You'll lose your work as far as the walk cycle is concerned, okay? But you'll never actually wreck your character, which is really kind of cool. So basically now I have a walk cycle that goes from frame 60 to frame 99. Then what I'll do is I'll go at 30, and I'm going to do a run cycle. And the run cycle is for our melee attack. We're going to have our character walk towards us very quickly, and then when they get within a certain distance, they'll run at us and do a melee attack. So we're going to program that all in. So now we need a run cycle. And that run cycle can be a little different than your references, but essentially what you'll do is go back to Google, and you just type in run cycle reference, right? And look at your images. And you know what, don't be afraid to do stuff differently. For a regular run cycle, this one's one of my favorites. But you can do stuff here where you see like this guy's running, he's a real sprinter. So you see like his hands are straight out, he's got his thumbs up, and see here they're really talking about how it's chopping. That's pretty cool. This one's kind of a leaping run, okay? Like big bounds, very cartoony, like that's kind of fun. Like you can do that as long as it fits the story of your game. I don't have a problem if you don't stick to a real true run cycle, but you just grab another reference, save it to your desktop, then go ahead and go back into the default. I find it's easier there. Turn this one off, okay? You can add another one so you don't even have to delete it. Open the run cycle and you start doing exactly the same thing. Position the body for the first keyframe, insert the keyframe, go to the next one, just keep going, and you'll have a run cycle. And then what we'll do is in Unity, we'll tell Unity when the character's walking, you play the animation between 60 and 99. Or when the character's running, you play the animation between 120 and so on and so forth. Here's the other thing that I've thought before we finish this up, or this is a thought, a little tip. Give yourself gaps between the animations. Decent size gaps, 15 to 30 frames. I like 30. And the reason why is so that you can see very distinctly where each cycle is when you look at it here on the timeline or on the dope sheet. I find that that's really, really helpful. If you put them right next to each other, it's just a little harder to keep track of. And since Unity does all the blending for us between animations, once we define where those animations are, the gaps between the animations don't actually matter that much. So I think it's easier for many people to organize themselves in little cycles and have gaps between those cycles so that we can call them later in Unity. Does this make sense to everybody, what you're supposed to be doing at least? Don't know if, you'll come up against problems. You'll come up against things that you want to do that are different or unique or whatever. It's okay. You can do something on your own. The real trick is making sure that at least it's a cycle. And that's really the key, so that as that animation runs over and over and over again, as the person or the character is walking or running, that you don't see glitches or jumps in frames. That's actually the really big thing. And then if you do a little head bob, or he like sways his hips a little bit when he's walking, or does something a little different because that's the style you want, have at it. And you can totally find reference frames that'll help you do that sort of animation on your own. Okay, so it doesn't really have to be exactly like what I did here. You can always change things up and make them your own. Any questions? Let's get to work.